Hey everybody, thanks for coming to another episode of the Project Insulin podcast. Very excited to have Caroline with us. She actually filled out our volunteer form and we talked about volunteering, but she shared her story and I wanted everyone else to hear about it. So Caroline, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do today, and then we'll get the show on the road.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you, Eric, for having
Yeah.
me. This is it's a fun thing to do, and it's nice to what you're doing, spread the word and sharing everybody's story, which is everyone has one or a different one. Currently, I'm a professor at Quinsigamond Community College in Worcester. I teach full-time faculty in the interactive media design program. So I teach all kinds of classes: photography, videography, digital imaging and media, a little bit of animation and stuff like that. Previously, I taught high school digital art and I taught elementary art, and I've pretty much taught all K through college. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's very cool. Is that your artwork in the background over there of the dog?
This one isn't. No, there's one above
Okay.
it that you can't see.
That
That
we can't see. And Caroline, I know the answer, so I'm not going to just ask, but how long have you had type 1 diabetes for?
So it will be coming up this April. It will be 41 years.
It might be April by the time this gets up, so it'll be at
There
least
we go.
41 years. Wow, that's a very long
Yeah.
time. And part of today's talk is going to be about how diabetes management has changed in those 41 years. But let's start with today. So today you're a professor, and I'm curious, do you go high or low in class? And then how do you navigate that? Do you tell your students? Do you explain the beeping? Like how?
Yeah, I know. I usually do. Like on the first day, I do explain because sometimes I usually my insulin pump is sometimes hidden, but sometimes I can see the tubing or whatever. So I do.
Mhm.
I let them know, and also I want them to know because if it does, and I have it set just no beeps, just vibration. But if I do, yeah, but I want to let them know because if it does beep and I or vibrate and I need to look at it, I don't want them to think that it's a phone, some type
Mhm.
of device
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
So I just explain it, and always the students are very supportive and understanding
Yeah.
about it. Some of them say, "Oh, my so and so sister, brother, whatever,
Mhm.
has the same thing," and things
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, every usually if I go a little high, it's okay because with the CGM and the pump, it'll correct it okay. But
Right.
lows are more challenging when
Mhm.
I'm in the classroom. But the good thing about being at the college level is it's okay for me to excuse myself. And I was teaching kindergarten and I'm alone in my
Mhm.
room with 20, 25 little kindergartners. There wasn't much I could do except I don't know what I did, but I just slipped some kind of sugar in. um, but now it's a little bit easier. It's challenging. You don't want it to happen, and sometimes
Mhm.
just for no reason, I try to eat the same things every day at the same time every day to help with that. But sometimes everything affects it. Like I could do the same thing today that I did yesterday. And if I have a different level of stress in my life, then my numbers are all like
Mhm. Yeah.
wacky.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
it yeah, it has its moments, but it's a lot easier to deal with at teaching at the college level.
yeah. And has you've had diabetes for 40 going on 41 years.
Yeah.
As a professional, has your experience with comfort to do something like that, where you just, of course, at a college level, you're saying it's easier, but has your experience also changed over time with your comfort level with telling your students, telling your employer, and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because rather than being like embarrassed about it or wanting to be secretive, I realized that it's part of who I am. And health is the most important thing, and taking care of it is the most important thing. And if you don't do that, then you have nothing. Yeah, it definitely has. When I was younger, especially, it made me feel different, and I wouldn't really want to share it and single myself out as being different than everybody else. But it's just such a part of me, and it's just so important to take care of it, that you just have to. I have to say, look, this is how it is. And
Right.
if you have a problem with it, see you later.
Yeah, that's on you. It's not my problem. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. And I'm glad that's the mentality you take, because it really, you
Right.
shouldn't, you need to keep yourself alive. If someone doesn't like, that's their problem.
Yeah. Sometimes the challenge is that people don't understand that it's a full-time job on top of
Mhm.
everything else. If you want to maintain control, you have to work at it. It's not
Mhm.
easy. It's a lot easier now with the pump and the CGM
Mhm.
than it was just with injections every day. But I had a situation when I started this job, my most recent job, where I didn't have insurance for the first 2 months, and I, I was out of my CGM
Mhm.
transmitters, so I didn't have that, and I had to rely on the finger sticks, and it was so hard, and I couldn't function at the level that I could have been. And people, they didn't get that. I'm like,
Mhm.
I can't do this as good as I should be able to. And just from not having the CGM,
Yeah.
it was frustrating to me that people just, there were some people who just didn't understand that. They pretended to. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think they tried to, but just unless it's something that you've experienced yourself, you can't imagine what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and I think like, we are doing affordable insulin, right? That is our focus at Project Insulin. These podcasts are more to share people's stories so people understand the hardship. It's not like insulin focused in particular. But something we haven't really talked about very often is 1 in 4 US healthcare dollars is spent on diabetes. And so the things you're talking about now, the test strips, the CGMs, the pumps, like that is all a bigger part of that 1 in 4 healthcare dollars.
Right.
Insulin is a big portion, or it accounts for a lot of money, but it is not the
Yeah.
vast majority of the issue for people.
But
So
without insulin, you can't use any of this other stuff.
exactly. Well, one thing at a time. We'll
Yeah.
figure out the other
Right.
things later. But yeah, but no, exactly. It's all these things play a big part. And when we first met to discuss volunteering opportunities, and I'm going to give a quick plug here. If you would like to volunteer at Project Insulin, check out our website, projectinsulin.org, and you'll meet with me and someone from our team, and we can discuss volunteer options. But when we met, that was the first time I've done a plug on the podcast, so it felt weird. One thing you said was you talked about having diabetes in 1982, what that was like, how your eating was regimented, but more specifically, you talked about diabetes as like having a toddler by your side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's like you have the silent partner with you at all times. And when you said that, I was like, this is something that we need to talk about, because I thought it was a very good way to put it. We've talked about diabetes burnout on the podcast before, and I'm curious, has that been a part of your life? How has it been a part of your life? And how do you get out of that, like the rut?
Yeah. I know it's so true, and I really pretty been in more recent years that finally there's been more moments than there has in the past where I'm like, I'm done. Just stop, no more. And it does. It can start weighing on you. And I think for me, I guess what do I do? You just keep going, and you just keep going, because you really have no, I guess there's always a
Mhm.
choice. But I'm going to be 100% completely honest. There have been times where I have to change my CGM, my transmitter, and I just don't, because I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. And I don't finger stick, I don't do anything. And I just let my pump do its thing, and what my
Yeah.
insulin's going to need, and I just let it go. And then after a day or two, I realized that I'm not feeling that great. So that's pretty much how I take a break. But then I realized that I can't. So
Right, right.
every once in a while, that's what I do. Then the toddler comes back home.
You sent him to summer camp for a couple days.
Yeah, right. For a day or two, a sleepover.
And so tell me about the beginning. you're diagnosed with diabetes, and you told me you don't remember what it was like before. So I'm not going to ask you about before. I'm going to ask you, like, what was the regimen? Like, how were you taking care of yourself? What were the things you did back then, and how did they? What are the? I don't need like day by day, year by year, but what are the
Yeah.
flashpoints where things changed and it got a little bit easier, or maybe it got a little bit harder, or what was it like transferring from one version of doing things to the next thing as new
Yeah.
advances came along?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, it was 2 shots of insulin a day. That's it, just 2 shots. And it was I remember I had this workbook, call it, and I was allowed to have, so at each meal, it was like breakfast. You could have one starch, and then these are a half a cup
Hmm.
of Rice Krispies, one fruit, which would be like a half a banana, and things like that. So each meal that they broke it down to what I could have. And then there was like a 10 a.m. snack and an afternoon snack, and I think a bedtime snack. And I would just do one shot in the morning, and then one shot at supper time, and then that was it. Yeah. And it was, and I remember, like, for a treat, you were allowed to have once a month a half a cup of ice cream. That you couldn't, they didn't, and as time went on, like when it transitioned over to carb counting, which really makes sense, became a lot more lenient, and you could have more things. And gosh, back in the only diet drink there was Tab. Like I could have a can of Tab. Like Diet Coke didn't exist, and there were no
Hmm.
diet Sprites. It was Tab Cola, and I think maybe Fresca was around back then. It was pretty much you drink water or Tab. There weren't any diet drinks, and I wasn't. I've never really been a big on sweets, so for
Hmm.
me that wasn't a huge deal. And then I think, I don't really remember, but as time, I do remember going back to school the first day, because way back then, like now, I don't even think when people are diagnosed with type 1, I don't even think they do overnight in the hospital. From
They do.
people, though they do. I
Yeah, yeah.
was I was a week in the hospital, a whole week.
Hmm.
And so I missed a week of school. And then I remember when I went back, it was again going back to the not wanting people to know. I remember one of my
Hmm.
teachers said, "You want to stand up and tell everybody what happened?" I was like, "Not really. I
Yeah.
didn't have a choice." Um, and that was hard too, because back then there weren't 504 plans, didn't exist. So if I had to have a 10 o'clock snack, nobody else was eating anything, and it was just weird. Like I would have to eat it in the hallway in between classes, and things like that. But
Could you what a 504 plan is, real quick?
oh yeah, sure. So 504 plans are plans that when you're in school, it provides an accommodation for you. If you have any type of medical condition, you go on a 504, everything's documented. So it would say nowadays, it would have said back then, student is allowed to take a break as
Mhm.
needed. Student is allowed to go to the nurse for lows or highs. Student can have snacks as needed, and things like that. So it's accommodations that students without diabetes or any other health condition don't get. So, and
Right.
504 stay with you for life. I know, like IEPs, individual education plans, and at high school, but 504s are with you for life. So that's what a 504 is, and they did not
Okay.
exist in 1983.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you explained it because I did not know about that.
Oh,
I've heard of it as, so my sister has a disability. I know about the disability offices at colleges. She did some virtual school in high school, so there's a little bit less of that need in
right.
high school. But I'm curious. I'm gonna go ask her after this. Was she on a 504 plan, or is she on a? Is that how she
Yeah,
does it? But anyway, good to learn something new.
yeah. And 504s are medical. I like just educate for students who might need a little more support or whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's very interesting to hear. So what did you do? Like, how did you advocate for it's 10 a.m., it's snack time for you. Did you just like, start eating? Did you like talk to your teachers? Other than the horrendously
No.
awkward, do you want to tell the class what happened? Was there any other interaction about
No,
this? Yeah.
I pretty much think I just said forget it and didn't do it. Yeah,
Mm,
because I was not in the in crowd, so I didn't want to give other students another reason just to
mm,
have something to tease me about. So I
mm,
think I just said forget it, and I just didn't have my snack.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that must have been really hard.
yeah, and then I guess I just got over it.
Do you remember what the next? So you were 2 shots a day with a highly
Hmm.
regimented eating schedule, and then you mentioned carb counting coming into play at some point.
Right.
Was there any like change to what was the next change into your like medical regimen?
Pretty much by the time I hit high school, I just didn't care. I didn't want it. And again, I just, because back at the time, I guess the next thing was when testing meters came out. Because when I was
Mm.
first diagnosed, it was little strips in a can, and you had to put your blood on it and wait 30 seconds and then wipe it off and match the colors on the strip to the side of the can.
Oh,
And it was like,
wow.
yeah, if the color, I can see him. There were two colors. One was like a turquoise, and one was like a tan color. And the darker they were, the higher you were. So it
Mm.
was like there was a range, like you were 20 to 30, 40 to 60, 60 to
Yeah,
80,
yeah.
and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that was yeah. So that's how I started too. And that was the thing too. I only tested twice a day. So it
Mhm.
was test twice a day. That's it. But then the meters came out, but it was a while. I don't think, I'm trying to remember when I got my first meter. Probably, mm, I, not in maybe I was in high school. I probably was, but maybe shortly thereafter. So late 80, early 90s. So that was the next thing, having the meter. Then it was like, I don't even remember when, because pretty much after high school, I stopped going to the doctor, and
Uh-huh.
all I did was just I gave my shots. Maybe every once in a while, I tested my blood, and then I remember probably, I don't know, maybe like in my early 20s, I said this is ridiculous. So went back to the doctor and started taking better care of myself, and
Mhm.
then yeah, and then when the pumps really started coming out, I didn't have insurance, so I didn't get a pump until 2007.
Mhm.
But that was the huge game
Big
changer.
jump. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then the next one was the CGM, and that
Yeah.
closed loop systems.
Yeah.
It's just like night and day going.
Mhm.
And I remember, I think in my 20s, that's when it was like, okay, instead of, it was like regular and NPH insulins that I would mix, it was maybe Lantus and something else, but
Mhm.
that maybe the regular. And that's when it was like, okay, smaller doses more frequently,
Right.
better than one in the morning and one at night. So that was the big thing.
Yeah, really interesting things here. First, the fact that the blood tests, the strips with the
The
against the
color.
coloring. Oh my God. Again, my experiences with diabetes is my partner has it, so I know
Yeah.
everything that she's been through. I don't know everything that obviously everything that everybody else has been through. And so just like hearing these stories and understanding what different people's experiences are. She does a keto diet. A lot of people don't do keto
Yeah.
diet. Like when I started learning about diabetes, it's like great. Gabby does keto diet. That means everybody does keto. Like that is just like standard diabetes. No, that's not. Like everyone has their own version of doing things. Learning about just like the history of the technology as well, like what was available,
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like I can only
Yeah.
imagine how much of a boon just getting a number on the on a test meter
Yeah.
versus
And you
having to go and like.
have to match it. Yeah. And it was like a range. And I remember one year, actually, it was the summer after I was first diagnosed, I went to the Clara Barton camp in Oxford, the diabetes camp. And I remember they taught me, because the other campers taught me this trick where if you, once you had it on the strip, if it was high, you could take an alcohol wipe and you could wipe it off, and it would make it like, it would like reduce the color. It would give you a price blood sugar. But then you go have your A1C taken, and they're like, wait a minute, this doesn't match up.
It's a very funny story. Wrap up today is Brett Michaels. Another fun thing he told me about in our volunteer meeting. And again, for those of you who are interested in volunteering, this is the conversation you'll have with me. Is I'll learn about you. We'll talk about your experiences and the
Do
potential
it.
opportunities. So Brett Michaels, tell me how he became a part of your life and what that experience was like and what it meant to you.
Going back to high school where I really struggled because I wasn't the most popular person. And so it was hard for me. And I loved music. Like music was my escape. Music took me away. And I loved it was the 80s and I loved the hair bands, the Motley Crue and all of that stuff. And Poison had pretty much just come out. Maybe they had been out for a year or so. And I loved Poison. And so one day my brother, because Brett, he obviously is type 1, and he didn't come out with he didn't say right away I'm a type 1, but then they were opening at the time, they weren't headlining yet, at I think if this was maybe 86, 87, at Madison Square Garden, and he went low and they had to take him off the stage. And so everybody thought that he was overdosing, he was on drugs or whatever. So then he had to feel like he had to explain what happened. So that was in the magazines and whatever. My brother, I remember one day he came running up to my room and just barged in, which we're in high school and we're not like buddy at the time. Long, give me my space. And he was just so excited to tell me. And to me, it really put everything in perspective, because here's someone that I looked up to and admired, and I didn't know. Like, it wasn't like I was like, people see me walking down the street, they know that I'm type 1, they know I'm different. And here was Brett and living his dream, and I had admired him already, and I didn't know that he was type 1. So to me it was really special. And I only knew a couple of other people at the time that were type 1s. It became my dream, my goal, my life mission to meet Brett. And I came close so many times. Like I wrote a whole story about it, and all the times that I should have met him and didn't. And then finally one day, it was August 11th, 1988. And I saw in a magazine they were supposed to be in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm 16. I had my license for 3 months, and I got in the car. I told my mom I was going out because I knew she wouldn't want me driving to Manchester by myself. I'd never been that far. And I took off and just drove to Manchester, and I didn't know where they were playing or if they were even really there. And long story short, I was just driving around in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I saw these tour buses parked in front of a hotel. So I drove in. There was like a U-shaped driveway, and I drove in. I couldn't park, but then I saw Ricky Rocket, the drummer, outside skateboarding, and I lost it. And I parked my car across the street. I ran over, and it was just like tears. And I said to him, I asked him, is Brett around? And he got, yeah, I'm just the drummer. You just want to sing. So then I explained it to him. And he was just so kind, and he was like wiping the tears from my face and said, oh, he'll be down. He said, you'll get to see him. So I waited all day, and I saw the whole band but Brett. And then finally, and there was I don't know, maybe 20 people there. And they were still the opening act. They were opening for David Lee Roth at the time. And so finally, Brett came down, and everybody just backed away because they all knew my story. And I just ran out. Oh my God. And he was just so kind. And he left me a ticket to the show. And yeah, just really sweet. And so then after that, I was like, oh, all I need to do is find their hotel. And so my mom, she let me skip school whenever they were anywhere in the vicinity, Providence, Portland, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. And I would just go to the hotel, and after the next couple of times, I would see him at the hotel, and so he would leave me tickets and passes, and my friends would get to go backstage, and it's just really the kindest we get. And it's just that bond. And I've met other just through poison and Brett, some of my very best friends.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's just so fun, and all these years later, and they're still kicking, which is pretty good.
Yeah, wow, that's
yeah.
it's a great story. Hey, sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just reminiscing in my mind. But yeah, it's been, I feel so fortunate, and the best one of the best parts about it is that going back to the miserable high school days, it was always great when people started realizing that I knew poison, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to be my friend, and nope, sorry. And I'd walk in the next day like all bleary-eyed. I'd still be wearing my backstage pass. So that was
That's a really amazing story. I appreciate you sharing it with us, and that's very cool. Really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds
either
like,
had it, but
yeah. Have you stayed in? Do you still talk to him ever? Have you ever
yeah,
when was the last time you communicated? I guess.
probably the last time that they were around, which will be 2 years this summer, when they were on tour. But the funny thing is, and that as far as Brett and I having the diabetes in common, the thing that came of it is actually I became very good friends with Ricky, the drummer, who was the first one because we just I don't know, clicked, and he's just been such a great friend to me and really supported me in everything. So I'm more in touch regularly with Ricky, to be honest with you. But Brett, he does some solo stuff, so I'll go see him then. But it's more like with Brett, it's more of just I go to the show and I'll get to see him, and we say hi after.
I'm curious when this goes up, if we tag Brett, Poison, and Ricky, is it going to be like, oh my God, I haven't seen Caroline in years, or is it, I'm glad to hear you saw them a couple years ago. Yeah. So I was just curious. Wait a second. Caroline, thank you so much for telling us your whole story, and telling us this really, it's a very important piece to you, it sounds, and it's like it was really big for you at the time with the band Poison. And is there any last things you'd like to share with the audience today?
Oh, let's see. I guess if you're not type 1 and you don't know anyone who's type 1, and you come into contact with someone who is, and they say, today I just can't do it, just understand that they can't. We all have those days, and to everybody who is just like me, just keep going. And if today sucks, tomorrow will be better. And also, getting back to what you said about your girlfriend and the keto diet, I don't know how many years ago, but I've been vegan for a long time, and I went raw vegan, and really everything you eat, that's what makes a difference, is just watching and thinking about everything that you put into your body. And sometimes it's not easy, but.
And it's interesting because it affects people differently, right? Like some food will affect some people in one way, but they don't affect other people at all. Or they affect people in the completely opposite directions. It sounds like finding your foods is what's important.
It's all trial and error. Exactly. Yep.
Thank you again. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, finally, you just hit this sweet spot. And thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Of course. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you enjoyed the episode, give it again. I don't do this often ever, so this is also weird to me. And maybe just tag Poison. Let them know that Caroline has such sweet words to share about them. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.